Sami said a lot of the early scientists were Christians. And I think you probably should have used Muslims rather than Christians in that I think Muslims made far greater contributions to science than Christians did in medieval and pre-medieval times. But the fact that they were religious doesn't actually make any difference to their science. The science is tested. Their scientific contributions are tested by whether what they come up with matches with the evidence. This is the difference between science and religion, is that scientists, or let's say if you're an individual who is both religious and scientific, while you're doing your scientific thing, you're looking at the evidence and you're seeing whether your theory matches up to the evidence. And if you're doing science properly, you're trying to disprove your theory. You get brownie points in science for proving that theories are wrong. Religion is the opposite. What religion does is you get brownie points for convincing yourself that you're right, regardless of the evidence. And if the evidence doesn't match up with your religious beliefs, then you have to reinterpret the evidence in order to make it consistent with it. As Richard Feynman said, look, it doesn't matter who you are in scientific terms, it doesn't matter how many letters you have after your name, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, if your ideas don't match up with the evidence, they're wrong. And that is why science has proved such a reliable way of helping us to understand reality in a way that theology and even philosophy have not been able to do. In terms of not being able to separate naturalistic explanations about morality from morality, I'm not sure, I may have misinterpreted what you were saying here, but I'm going to give go what I think you're talking about. If you take, well, first of all, you don't have to divide the two. Well, let's first of all assume that morality, I think it's incontrovertible that morality is related to how you deal with other sentient beings. The way that Sam Harris has put this in recent books is that if morality and right and wrong are to mean anything, then most sane people would agree that the worst possible world is a world where all conscious beings are suffering to the maximal extent all of the time. But it's pretty hard to think of a worse world in moral terms than that. And therefore, every step away from that situation is a step towards a better world, and every step towards that situation is a step towards that worst possible scenario. Now, it's not easy to figure out, as I say, what it is what effect your action, any given action, is going to have. All you can do is make your best, most informed guess based on compassion and empathy and reciprocity. But it gets complicated when you throw religion into the mix, because you have additional commands that aren't based on that. And you don't have to remove it from naturalism. I mean, it is like everything that affects any conscious being is essentially affecting how they are thinking and feeling, which can in principle be mapped onto neurological processes in their brains. So when something happens that makes you feel one way rather than another way, there's something happening in your brain that is measurable. And whereas the complexity of it with the scientific tools we have available at the moment makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to map the nuances of that. In principle, it's mappable, and in future generations, it's quite credible to anticipate that we will be able to map morality indirectly through the effect of people's behaviour on the thinking of other conscious beings. To a degree that removes the artificial distinction that people have between science and morality and say that science can't tell us anything about morality. All that you have to do, the only step that you have to take to make the rest of that flow inevitably, is the step that Sam Harris describes as accepting that the worst possible world is a world where every conscious being is suffering to the maximum extent all of the time. And I think there would be very few people who could imagine a worse world than that. Sami talked about the survival of the fittest as if, you know, secularists suggest that's the strong survive is a good basis for morality, and you know that's not the case. You know, most ethical secularists do not say that, and it's based on a misunderstanding of evolution. The phrase "survival of the fittest" should really be, the word "fit" in that should really be thought of less than the physically fittest and more of that which fits best into the environment. And the species that fit best into the environment in which they're living are the species that will survive. And one of the ways that species do survive is through empathy and compassion and reciprocity, which have evolved in the same way as physical attributes have evolved, because they are properties of our brains, and our brains have evolved in the same way as our bodies have evolved. Finally, just very briefly, the Stalin and Mao issue. I'm glad that, I'm happy to see that Hitler was left off the list, because he's often included in those lists, despite the fact that he wasn't an atheist. And despite the fact that the Nazis went into battle with God with us written on their belt buckles, and that one of the first things that Hitler did when he came into power was sign a concordat with the Catholic Church. So I'm happy that in this instance Hitler has not been included in this list of atheist atrocities in inverted commas. But the point about Stalin and Mao, it's 8 minutes, is it? Yes. Okay, the point about Stalin and Mao is that although they were atheists, they didn't do what they were doing in the name of atheism. They did it in the name of their own particular faiths and dogmas. And they did it because their own particular faiths and dogmas more correlated to how religion operates than to how ethical secularism operates. Thank you.